take us back to March 10th, 2020. So you were on stage at the Olympia. It was a full house. The show went really well. And the next day, I think everything changed.
Yeah, it was kind of like, yeah, what do you do? So, like everybody, I just kind of thought, oh, I'll take a bit of a holiday, I suppose, for a couple of weeks and see how this pans out. And then I suppose here we are all this time later.
So what did you do? How did you pivot then? Was it straight online or what were the next few weeks like?
Yeah, it didn't take too long. So the next kind of, I suppose, 6 weeks, I was just pretty much a bit lost, like a lot of people even now still are maybe. And, I was just trying to figure out what to do, whether even what I was doing could be pivoted and put online. But then I kind of got myself together after that 6 weeks and then made the decision to at least research the possibility of going online. So I did that over the course of like 10 days. And then I went into what I call super activation mode. So super activation mode for me is one gear forward, 18 hours a day work. Now, obviously, always making enough time for exercise and family within that 18 hours. Okay. So for me, exercise, I consider part of my job. So that's very different than a lot of people because I've got to exercise to be fit to be on stage, to do the escapology part of what I do. So that comes within the bubble of my job. But then I always make enough time for my family. But with that being said, super activation mode means everything else goes away. So the hobbies are gone. Netflix is gone. Everything is gone until I need to do what needs to be done. And at that moment in time, it was pivot online. So that took, again, super activation mode. I talk about it all the time, and people sometimes don't realize, if you do it, you're going to win. So here's a first for you, okay? So I haven't spoken about this yet. Last year, so this time last year, pretty much, when I was in the Olympia Theatre, when I flipped that couple of weeks later online, I decided I wanted to get back on Ellen DeGeneres, and it's quite a long story, so I won't get into it. But ultimately, to vision that and action upon it and make it happen, I started talking about it in my keynotes as if it was going to happen. So I said in every keynote that I started in, I'm going to be on Ellen DeGeneres later this year. Here's how I will do it. I'm going on super activation mode and I won't take no for an answer. And they were all laughing and giggling like in these keynotes that I was giving because they just thought it was a bit crackpot of an idea. Now, I'd been on Ellen DeGeneres a bunch of times previously, but I hadn't been on in 13 years. So you have to understand, I didn't have any contact within the Ellen organization. So I was starting from scratch. The same way, Brian Crook would need to go right now to Ellen to get on Ellen. Same process.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that happened in October last year. And that's what super activation mode is. But
I had that on the list actually to ask you. I wanted to ask you about that Ellen appearance because I think I heard you speak about that previously, that effectively you had that on your vision board. That was something you aimed for. Like you made that happen yourself.
Yeah, like I have to tick it off because here's the gas thing. I looked at my goals last night and I've got 1 to 10, 5, 4. So I've got 19 short-term, medium-term, long-term and zany goals. And out of the 19, I can't see it from here, but I know I looked last night, I've probably got about 11 of them done. So I need to wipe them off now and replace them with something else. But like now those all 18 should technically be done by now. But see, I'm okay with that. I always set enough targets. I don't overdo it, but I set enough targets that if in a year's time I've hit over 50% of those targets, that's a massive success because I set really, really high targets for myself. Yeah. One of my new targets in the middle of this, is years ago I set a target. So it was when I was 23 when I decided to become a full-time entertainer. I was still in a full-time day job, and I decided, look, if I didn't get to be a full-time entertainer by the time I was 30, then I would give up the dream. And I would have given it up. I know I would have given it up. But luckily, I turned professional when I was 23. So I was 7 years ahead of that target. And then from then, it was always debt-free by 60. That was kind of my motto in my head. But then I thought to myself, like just in the middle of this whole crazy world that we're in, why am I waiting until I'm 60? So now my new thing is debt-free by 50. So I've got 6 years to achieve that now. So just get all the debts gone. People might be surprised to hear that I still have debts, but like a lot of people, I still have debts. I still have mortgages. So it's debt-free by 50. But yeah, the Ellen thing really helped with the US branding because now I've got a lot of work in the US. So like I did a gig just a couple of weeks ago for EO Nashville. And then I had a gig like the night before that in New York. So yeah, it really helped, you know.
Brilliant. Talk to me about the vision board stuff again. For the lay person, I suppose, for everybody, how do you determine whether your zany goal is, you know, too ridiculous, say, to be achieved? How do you stretch yourself, push yourself, but at the same time have that element of realism in there?
With the zany goals, there's no realism.
Right.
You allow yourself to go as bonkers and as crazy as possible. I think we're too self-limiting, especially in the times that we're in. So we have to eliminate those self-limiting beliefs. If I told you, for example, that I was going to hang upside down outside the RT building with a straitjacket around me, 150 foot in the air with my head wrapped in cling film so I couldn't see or breathe, you'd say, well, that sounds impossible. Well, yeah. And when I come up with these stunts, I've no idea how I'm going to do them. See, that's what people don't understand about the magical thinking of a magician. When we come up with things, we train ourselves to not limit ourselves. We don't know how we're going to do all these things. People wonder the process. The process is I come up with the idea first, and then I backtrack down to a reasonable method. So for me, like one of my zany goals and dreams, and I keep saying this so I know it's going to happen, and I feel a bit silly saying it because I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm actually going to have to do this someday now. So it's climbing Kilimanjaro in my underpants with the Iceman, Wim Hof. So that sounds like crazy probably to a lot of your listeners. And it is crazy and it's supposed to be crazy, but your crazy goals and dreams should be aspirational. So I talk about my goals as targets. So I don't have goals written up on my vision board there. I've got targets. See, goals very often can become just an aspirational thing that you're looking towards, whereas a target has a specific measurable distance that, like, if you think of it better like an arrow reaching a target, it's got a measured distance that arrow needs to go. Whereas a goal sometimes, even if you put a timeline on it, can sometimes in your head just become, as I said, aspirational. So I see everything as targets and I write them down as targets and I give myself that measurable distance to go, that measurable time to go, and then obviously, you know, figure out the actions required to move towards those targets. So when you go back to the vision board, I've got a vision board. You know, some people rip out magazines and stuff, but then they just sit there and they kind of practice the law of attraction and they hope that that's going to happen. Listen, law of attraction is great, but like, you're not going to sit in your house and dream up that a Lamborghini is going to land outside it. And that was, you know, I suppose popularized way back when with The Secret, the book and stuff like that. But I think people missed the point, or I'd have to look back on it, whether they made the point or not, that you have to take massive action. So if you look at the high performers in business, for example, the Bransons, the Musks, like Elon Musk is a good example. Like, I do believe he's a bit of a kind of a trap genius. He's got a very strange way of thinking, an interesting way of thinking. But like in all of his interviews, they say to him, you know, you give us a couple of insights to the secret to your success. And he goes, yeah, well, you know, working 80 to 120 hours a week when the competition is working 40. And within 3 months, you'll achieve what they would have achieved in a year. And there's a lot to be said for that. Now, of course, people listening might say, well, don't you want to find balance in life? I'm like, balance is boring for me. I've made a very conscious decision that, you know, potentially I could be knocking 3 years off my lifespan by the type of lifestyle that I live. I'm very happy to do that because I'm achieving all these crazy, interesting things that I'm achieving. I'm living what I consider a peak performance lifestyle, not meaning that I'm always at peak performance. I'm not. I fail a lot. So I don't want to put myself up on any kind of pedestal. But what I'm saying is I program myself daily to achieve all of these different things that I want to achieve. I put in massive hours. But the most important thing is I always am conscious of spending enough time with my family. And I think that's the balance that a lot of people miss. Balance for me is just being very aware of not just spending time with my family or quality time, but actually wanting to spend that quality time with my family. And if you look at a lot of, you know, high performers in business, a lot of them are divorced, a lot of them are lonely. A lot of people talk about how wonderful Steve Jobs was, but if you look at his biography or his, you know, or his history, you know, I don't necessarily know that he was a very happy person when he passed away, you know, because he didn't, to my knowledge, spend that time with his family, and he certainly didn't appear to be the most endearing or empathetic human being that you would come across. And for me, I at least aspire to be all of that, not him, like empathetic and aspirational. And as I said, I fail a lot, but at least if you have that mindset, then it'll serve you well.
I love that. Yeah, I love that mindset idea. And the balance is an interesting point you raise. I wanted to ask you about the super activation mode. Does that come in peaks and troughs? Are you in that for 3 months and then maybe you pull back for a month before you go again, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, you hit it pretty much bang on. It's kind of 3 months at a time.
Right.
It's not sustainable in the long term. Like
Hmm.
ultimately, like you should be getting 7 hours sleep. That's the science, right? So the science is it's not 8 hours, it's not 9 hours, it's not 6 hours. The average human being should be getting a solid 7 hours unbroken sleep, especially athletes. So when you're on super activation mode, you're kind of only getting 5 or 6 hours sleep a night. So that's not sustainable in the long run. You will burn out. Now, for me, I've just got the type of DNA that I can go a long time on little sleep without it being too detrimental to me. So a long time for me is 3 months. I recommend that people don't do longer than 3 months, and then you take a break. Like I've got a lot of projects on, and to make the time to do the amount of things that I like to do, then ultimately you got to put in the hours. It's like Will Smith. See, I believe that one sentence can change your life forever if you start to really listen to people. So, for example, with your podcast, I'm sure people listen to it and then they go back about their business and they might think slightly about something somebody has said, maybe Dermot Whelan, like you mentioned, or myself, whatever. But actually, when we listen to podcasts, when we read books, we should look at them and listen to them with an open mind to changing the course of our life forever with one sentence, one word, even. So for me, that happened years ago because I always attacked knowledge from that perspective of self-development, learning, and being willing to change my habits and my plan and my destination. So ultimately, years ago, Will Smith, he was just a rapper at the time, so I'm going back about 20 years or more.
The Fresh
And
Prince.
yeah, back to the Fresh Prince, probably even before that. And he was a rapper, and he was in this interview, and they said to him, "Look, what's the secret to your success?" And he said, "Oh, it's quite simple. When all the rappers are in bed, I'm up rehearsing my rapping." And that's it. And that resonated with me. So even to this day, I say to myself, all right, why am I putting in this late hours? Because every night I'm up to like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Uh, and then I say to myself, well, all the other magicians are in bed, all the other executive coaches, they're all in bed. I'm up absorbing knowledge, writing knowledge. I'm up writing new keynotes. And then, I might pop onto Instagram for a second to see who else is up. And then I look at The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, regardless of what your opinion is on the man. Like he's a very positive human being. He's always online, but he gets up at 3 a.m. and does a workout, and then he goes straight to set, right? So, you look at him, and again, he's a massively successful individual. So, for me, the key is always also being infinitely curious, as I say it, and then having a lot of fun. Like I have a huge amount of fun, and that's the part that people miss. I'm not here hating coming into my cabin. I'm not here hating talking to you or hating I'm loving every moment of it all. Now, sometimes it can be hard work. So, for example, when I flipped online initially, I was worried about the internet dropping out. I was worried about my own material not working. I was worried about, was Joe up to scratch on, switching cameras and all this kind of stuff. So, you have those moments. So at the start of a new project, there's all that anxiety and things that come with it. But now I'm actually loving it. But I love getting back to performing live as well. So this won't replace that.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to get back to performing live. But there's nothing that I do that I find I hate doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally get it. And fully, as a self-employed person as well, fully appreciate the hard work and working when people aren't working and getting that advantage. What about the argument then we often hear of working smarter and not harder? Maybe somebody like Cal Newport who would talk about get your periods of deep work, but then also your periods of, is it exercise, is it relaxation, is it family time, is it downtime, effectively, where those periods of downtime will actually allow your deep work periods to be that bit more creative, that bit more innovative, and that bit more productive.
Yeah, look, I agree with him on a certain extent, but when you're on super activation mode, no. I mean, you gotta get stuff done. So, like for example, in the middle of a pandemic, this is a new business. This is not a business model that existed for me. So if I just put in like a certain amount of dedicated time, let's just call it like, we'll just say take the weekends off. So that's 2 days off. And then if I worked, maybe I upped it a little bit and I worked 10 hours a day instead of what I talk about, which is working, minimum 16, but for me it's 18 hours a day. Well, you could do that, But I would not be sitting here talking to you having had the December that I had, which is working 5 to 7 gigs a day in December. That
Mhm.
wouldn't have happened. So I do believe in the fact that you have to have downtime and refresh and reboot and all that kind of stuff. So on a regular basis, outside of my super activation mode, I do all of these things. So that's why I talk about being infinitely curious. For me, if you're creating a new business, you got to go all in and then just spend that time with the family, and then you got to park your downtime for a couple of months until you get stuff done, and then you can come back up, breathe the fresh air, and go again and reboot. But yeah, on an ongoing basis, I do loads of things like every day. See, I consider this part of my work, though. That's where people might, I suppose, misunderstand me. So for me, part of my work is doing my Wim Hof breathing every single day. Part of my work is a cold shower. So people might go, how's that part of work? Well, like you, like I'm self-employed.
Mhm.
I'm the boss. I'm the business. So I've got to be the best possible version of myself every single day. So that means exercise, Wim Hof breathing, my flexibility band work, because I'm covered in injuries, of loads of injuries, bad injuries at that. So I've got to keep those at bay. Cold showers to dump dopamine, serotonin, and adrenaline into my system first thing in the morning. So all of these things I do on a regular basis, in addition then to the super activity mode. So yeah, I mean, for me, again, I find balance boring. Too many people go, "Oh, you have to have balance." Yeah, that's okay if you want to have an average life. Go for it. Work 9 to 5. Watch Netflix and whatever you want to do. Guard your mind wisely at all times. Guard your mind wisely at all times. I really live like that. So I just surround myself by useful information. Now I relax and I watch drama. Don't get me wrong, but I'm talking about like all that crappy news feed on
Mm.
QAnon and Donald Trump and even in the coronavirus now and the conspiracy theories. Everybody gets sucked into that. But
Yeah.
instead of getting sucked into that, get sucked into your work. I don't know if you know this, but like the average person spends about 13 and a half hours during work week digitally distracted. So
Mhm.
that's the stats. So when I hear people saying, "Oh, I don't have time to do breathing, I don't have time to exercise, I don't have time," it's nonsense. Just in your work week alone, you've 13 and a half hours to spare that you didn't know you had because you didn't realize, or you didn't focus on what you're focusing on. So if you stop for a moment and actually do what I call so very quickly, a reorientation day is where you stop one day a month. When I say a day, it takes 4 hours. So I recommend 4 hours. And you get nothing but a journal and a pen, and you go somewhere uh, really quiet. So either the family, if you have family, need to leave the house, or you just go somewhere, whether that's a quiet beach or a remote place outdoors, or whether you go to a spa, your favorite spa, you get your massage, and then you do 4 hours in the meditation room or wherever it is. But you're just there with your journal, leather bound journal, I might add. I mean, it blows my mind the amount of people that write down their ideas in really crappy places. If you value your ideas, put them in a valuable place. And that valuable place should be a valuable notepad that you buy wherever you buy it, Moleskine notepad or better even than that, whatever you can afford, but like not a scratch pad. And then during that reorientation day, reflect on where you've come from, reflect on where you're going to, reflect on your targets, write everything down, do a full brain dump, examine all of that information, and then plan for the month ahead. And that reorientation day is so key for me. Doing 4 hours of that every month, planning for that 4 hours, like putting in the schedule,
Yeah.
those 4 hours, and then turning the bloody phone off. Like that's the most important thing, and not looking at the phone. And people go, "Well, what about an emergency?" Well, if I'm down in Monarch Spa or I'm lying on a beach in Wicklow and I'm like an hour and a half away from my house, when the restrictions open up, we'll
Yeah.
add that in there, right? But when I'm down there, I can't get back up quick enough. And if an emergency happens, you're going to have to deal with it on your own, whoever you are, whether that's my wife or my dad or my mum or whatever it is. So that emergency can wait for that length of time. Because if the kids get sick to the extent that they need to be brought to hospital, I'm an hour and a half away. I can't get up here quick enough. So turn your phone off for 4 hours. There's nothing that can't wait for 4 hours. And then that will serve you well.